I've always thought science fiction was the best genre because you can do everything else in it.
I believe science fiction is the genre best apt to explore both the fears and the hopes of the future. But I believe most people think science fiction is kind of progressive and radical because it's always about what's changing in the future, not about what's staying the same. But I think it also has to have a conservative uh, theme to it, no matter what your personal politics are, because you are supposed to show if technology changes things in the future, what also stays the same.
Correct.
You see, if you're a fan of Casablanca, you will recognize the song as time goes by, because there's certain things that are just not going to change. When two lovers woo, they'll still say "I love you," and so on and so forth.
Hello and welcome to Haman Nature. I am Adam Haman, and this fine fellow I'm staring at right now is author John C. Wright, who wrote one of my favorite science fiction trilogies ever called The Golden Ecumene, comprised of these three books you can see on the screen: The Golden Age, The Phoenix Exultant, and The Golden Transcendence. Thank you for writing these books, John, and welcome to Haman Nature.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure to write those books. You will be surprised to find that I wrote all three in 9 months, but it took me 5 years to sell them.
Oh, wow, I didn't know
I
that.
started shopping them around in 1995. They came out just in time for the turn of the century, so that Publishers Weekly, and this, keep in mind, is the first week in January of the new millennium, said, "This is the most important writer of the new millennium." Now, that's very flattering to me, but it's a joke because it meant I'm the most important writer of the week.
Yeah, that's what they say, isn't it?
But
Um,
I'm glad you did like the series.
there's no way you would remember this, but I liked the series so much that after finishing it, I did something I never do. I reached out to you via email and said, "Gosh golly, dear sir, thanks for writing this thing. It was great." And you were kind enough to respond a couple of times, and so thank you for that.
You're quite welcome. You'd be surprised at two things. First, how bad my memory is, and then second, I don't get that much fan mail. Of course, I answer every letter.
Yeah, it was great. So before we dive into the series, which I have questions about, would you like to tell the viewers a little bit about yourself, your origin story, where you came from, and
Hmm.
why you have these crazy ideas in your head?
If I just say I was bitten by a radioactive spider, is that good enough, or do I need to actually tell the truth?
I think
I'm not used to telling the truth because I'm a lawyer by training. I'm a newspaperman and a science fiction writer. So none of those professions have anything to do with the truth. Um, I there's not much to say about myself. Like most writers, my life has been relatively uneventful. There's only once in my life when I was on the lam and had to hide from the police.
that's not
Uh,
bad.
and I quit newspaper work because I didn't like staying up until 2 in the morning to put the paper to bed every Friday evening. And uh, after that, I was a tech writer in Northern Virginia, just writing computer manuals for many years, and furiously working on my science fiction on the evenings and weekends. And only just this year have I tried to turn it to full time writing.
Hmm.
So, and that's why I'm eager to sell any books I can, because the New York publishers have gone they've lost their soul, or they sold it to the devil or something, and they're no longer really that good at finding and promoting material. And the internet is a wild west wasteland, and I'm really just not sure how to find readership in it. So
Yeah, it's tough times.
stop.
I grew up reading voraciously, and I still do read, but I think it's a dying art. I mean, there's so much content to be, gathered into your senses in other ways that actually picking up a book, I kind of have to. It's like I don't want to give up my sacred priesthood or something. So I feel your pain.
Well, it's not just that; it's also that the sheer size of the genre. I
I know.
believe science fiction has become the mainstream nowadays. Before Star Wars as a movie was actually had a bigger impact than people tend to think. Before that, science fiction was a small kind of ghetto genre where basically everyone who had read everything had kind of read everything everyone else had read.
Mm,
And my knowledge of science fiction was encyclopedic if it was stuff published before the 1980s.
Right.
You could ask me about any author. If I hadn't read him, I at least would have heard of him. But nowadays, I basically stopped reading for pleasure after I became a professional writer, because if I had free time, I wrote something rather than read something. Say, so there's whole genres, there's whole, famous authors, top-notch, top 10 authors that I've never even heard of, which is terribly embarrassing. You're supposed to keep abreast of what's happening in the field. But every time I peep into what's happening in the field, it looks like it's kind of degenerating into a not very entertaining, I don't know, sort of political scrum,
Mm, really?
like a conflict between various ideologies that just doesn't seem very appealing to me. It doesn't seem very science fictional at all. So we used to be a kind of a tightly knit group, and nowadays, basically, it's when we became popular, that has advantages and disadvantages. And one of the disadvantages of popularity is that everyone rushes into the latest thing, and the crowd is just too huge for it to be small, comfortable, and familiar anymore. The big advantage is that now everyone's reading it. I mean, if I find a proper audience, I'll have many good readers, but I got to find them somehow. So that's where I'm at.
Well, I loved this series
What?
from the second chapter of the first book. I mean, I knew I'd probably like it, just from the cover and the blurb and the description, but I'm going to ask you sort of about the overall plot and a bunch of other questions, but I want to describe to the listener exactly when I knew I was just going to love this book with clearly enormous ideas in it. It was the moment that Phaethon, is that correct? How do you pronounce that?
Phaethon, yeah.
Yeah. He is greeted by this Neptunian, some enormous frozen cube creature. And he greets him with a short paragraph of text. But in order to avoid confusion and misinterpretation, and to fully communicate all the nuance in subtext, he accompanies this paragraph with this enormous data file of memories and definitions and poetry and art, memories, both real and fictional, and even instructions on how Phaethon might rewire his nervous system so as to more fully capture the emotional resonance of the paragraph of text that is meant to be conveyed. And that just blew me away, at its lawyerly thoroughness, and also at just how much in this world you were writing about the human mind was capable of, just in enormously huge changes and powers we could not grasp. So good on you for that.
Thank you.
So yeah, maybe tell us the arc roughly of this series and what major themes you were trying to explore.
Okay. So I do warn you, hearing authors talk about themselves is intensely boring, and the fun parts are actually in the book, which is what people should read to be entertained. But I will tell you about a little bit about the behind the scenes. Once upon a time, I was at a science fiction convention, and a young lady in the audience stood up and said, "Everything in life is worse and getting worse. Uh, recent studies have shown that everyone's going to die soon, and we're all going to live in misery forever." Now, this was 25 years ago. This is the 2000s. No, belay that. This was 30 years ago now. Look at how long and gray my beard is. 30 years ago, this it was. So the young lady was talking in the 90s, which were a time when the Soviet Union had just fallen. It was before 9/11. It was before the global war on terror. So we were at peace with the world. The communism had been finally unambiguously robbed of its its alleged moral superiority. Everything was looking up. So I said to the young lady, I said, "Why do you think that the technological, moral, and spiritual progress of mankind is suddenly going to end, or worse, what makes you think that it's degrading?" Now, keep in mind, I was young, but nowadays I would probably side with her because, of course, as an old man, it's my not only my pleasure but my duty to be a curmudgeon and to say things are going to hell in a handbasket.
Shake
But as a
fist
young man, you're supposed
shake
to say
fist
the
at
opposite.
cloud. Yeah.
Say again? I'm sorry, say again?
Shake fist at cloud.
Certainly, yelling at the clouds is the privilege of the old men. It's something that we're supposed to gain as we age. But as a young man, you're supposed to be foolishly optimistic. So I said, I said, what makes you think, my dear, that we're not going to enter into a golden age? In the time, there were people born before the Wright brothers flew who lived long enough to see the moon shot. Okay,
Yeah.
so that's within one lifetime. Now extrapolate that over 100 years, over 1,000 years, over 1,000,000 years. Where do you think it's going to end? It's either going to end in disaster, it's going to end in a utopia. So I said to myself, why don't I write something set in the best possible future I can imagine? Now, at the time, I was a libertarian, so I thought the best possible future was one that had absolutely maximum liberty and absolutely minimum government without being anarchy, without being lawless, and where everyone would more or less voluntarily respect the rights of everyone else. Now, it's an unrealistic premise, but it's a science fiction story, so let's just say that it happens that way. And I propose that the artificial intelligences of the far future, and I set this 500,000 years in the future, uh, uh, would be so wise and so well able to advise men that they would warn people beforehand when they were about to do something that would lead to long-term bad consequences, and that for some reason people would heed the wise advice of the machines over this long period of time. And I just assumed that the medical science at the time would make people immortal. And I said, okay, what is the maximum possible technological uh, heights to which mankind could possibly reach without assuming anything that modern science says cannot happen? So there's no psychics in my background, because psychics is not confirmed by modern science. There's no time travel or faster than light travel, even though those are staples of science fiction. Uh, they're not actually realistic. I was trying to write something more hardcore and yet extrapolate it out to as near to infinite as I could possibly imagine. So I was trying to write the most ambitious thing I could as far in the future as I could. I was primarily inspired by Last and First Men by Olaf Stapledon, a writer from England who was a contemporary with H.G. Wells, who is not well remembered or well regarded, but he's a personal favorite of mine. I don't know if you have ever heard of him.
I haven't, no.
Uh, he wrote in the 30s and 40s, back before science fiction was called science fiction. Like I said, he was more or less contemporaneous with Wells, or maybe a generation later, maybe 20 years later than Wells. His book is not even a novel. There's hardly any dialogue in it. It's the future history of mankind from the present, 1930, all the way to the far future after 11 or 18 different iterations of the race of mankind recreate themselves
Oh,
using
wow.
biotechnology, and they have to leave Earth and move then first to Venus and then to Neptune, which at the time they thought was a solid planet. And the conceit of that book is that an 18th man, the final race of mankind, sensing the oncoming destruction from the sun, he didn't say going nova, but basically the sun dying, sends his mind back through time to the current author to tell him of what's going to happen in the future. You say that kind of ambition. I said, okay, I want to do that. Now, twice now in this interview, I've said 500,000 years, but the publication material, for some reason, the guy who wrote the blurb, the jacket blurb, said 10,000 years, and I was like, are you kidding? I postulate that there's a space colony that's 10,000 years away at Cygnus, the black hole at Cygnus X1, that more than one. My main character is more than 10,000 years old. Okay, at the beginning of the book. Okay. Now, here's the other conceit. Originally, I made this up as a role-playing game for my circle of friends. When I was DMing, I was the moderator. And in the role-playing game, I said, okay, there's going to be a really futuristic society with really high technology, and you're going to have personal immortality. But the catch is that if you leave the solar system, you're outside of the range of the immortality circuit, which means you can die in space, but you can't die if you don't leave the Earth. So consequently, no one leaves the Earth. You say, because in the game I made up, what I was going to do is I would say the player characters have the only working starship that has ever been built by mankind, because no one wants to use it. And it was built by your eccentric uncle who leaves it to you, and that's how the game starts. It was going to be an exploration kind of game. I never did end up running the game, but the background material was so interesting that I wrote a novel in it. And in this case, the eccentric guy was called Phaeton, because I decided to name everyone in the far future after someone in the far past or a mythical being because I thought, following H.G. Wells thought the far future would be filled with men like gods. So I said, okay, I'm just going to call these guys Helion and Phaeton and so on and so forth. But my version of Phaeton is going to be the guy who tries to drive the chariot of the sun and succeed, because of course I'm going to write the optimistic version of all these old stories. So then, as I was there pondering, well, what is the limit of what these people can do, of what these golden age people can do? And I said, well, their crime rate would be very low, but it can't be zero because they're still human beings. And the possibility of war can be very low, but it can't be zero. So they have to at least have one soldier left, even if they don't have any others. So I said, okay, that one soldier has got to be Atkins from the Rudyard Kipling poem. He's the only guy who's worth keeping around. And and I said, also, what could go wrong? Because for every utopia, you have to kind of have a dystopia. So I decided there was one extrasolar colony that had ever been created, but that it went haywire, that it went bad. Because the other thing I said is, let's assume that nothing else can go wrong, and let's assume you actually have a practical method of expanding the human lifespan as indefinitely. You can record your brain information into new bodies. Whenever an old body wears out, you can rewire your brain to be anything you like. You basically can do anything to yourself that you like, and you can't do anything to anyone else without their consent. That was the basic rule of the golden acumen. That was my kind of the libertarian idea of, you can do it, whatever you wish is the whole of the law, but you just can't harm others. Okay, so carry that out to the ultimate extent. So I said, well, there still has to be social norms in a society in order to have a society. So they have to have a method of non-violently exiling each other. So that's what happens in the second book. It's my main character. You see, so the plot is, let me sum up the story for those who haven't read it, without giving away any spoilers. The main character has done something wrong, but in order to get along with the rest of society, he and everyone else on Earth has agreed to forget about the matter, to file away their memories in a memory lockbox and not address them. And the boxes will not stay open provided no one else opens the box.
And the
Whoever the crime
matter
is done is forgotten. What's that?
the matter occurred over a period of 200 and some years.
Yes.
So that much time has to be excised from everyone's
Right.
memory.
So everyone's agreed for the sake of peace and amity to just forget about the matter. Well, so he has in his memory mansion, and by the way, these people live in a virtual reality of several levels of virtuality, and they visit the real world only rarely. And since it's a libertarian society and a freewheeling capitalism, it's just filled with advertisements. So they have to wear sense filters so they only see the reality they want to see according to whatever they like. And at the time when I made that up, sense filters was a really good idea, a really original idea. But nowadays, basically everyone with a computer is using something like a sense filter to curate his own version of reality, and so on and
very
so forth.
soon we're going to have augmented reality. And
Yeah,
I thought you were way ahead of your time. I was going to ask
I
you this question. I mean, everyone lives in their own little bubble now, sort of metaphorically, but in the story
right.
you wrote, that's literally true.
What most stories are meant to be metaphors of reality. That's what makes them stories. I mean, I was trying to emphasize that something about uh,
Just to
the story is about truth, and if you have a high technology, your ability to fool yourself is higher because technology gives you more power. More power gives you more latitude for abuse. So if you have augmented senses like Superman and you can see a molecule on the moon from the surface of the Earth, you can also fool yourself into surrounding yourself with non-existent people and false memories and so on and so forth.
just
Because if
to
you're sovereign over yourself in the golden acumen, you can do anything you like to yourself. But they did have a college of hortators. A hortator is someone who non-violently urges people to virtue. They did have a type of censorship, but it was more like Roman censorship than American censorship. That is to say, it was an organization that was completely private and all volunteer. But the guy who ran the monopoly on the immortality circuit was a member. So if you defied the College of Portators and everyone decided to boycott you, well, they would cut you off from your immortality subscription. So you were now a mortal man again. You see. So it was technically not coercive, but in reality it was was an overwhelming imbalance of economic pressure. So,
Just to
without giving away any spoilers, my main character Phaeton has a little box in his memory mansion that says that deeds of renown without peer rest within this box. If he opens it, he'll remember them. But if he leaves them shut, he will be happy. You see? So if he likes truth more than happiness, then he should open it. But if not, leave it be. Okay? So that's the temptation. Which is more important, truth or happiness? And he has to pick one or the other. So,
yeah, just to flesh out what you're talking about with the virtual reality. Uh, you could think you were walking in a starry meadow, moonlit meadow with dew on the grass and nobody else around you. But then you hit a button and all of a sudden you realize the reality is you're in the middle of some Turkish bazaar with people yelling and screaming all around you, and advertisements everywhere, because why
yeah,
not? Freedom, and there's no zoning here, obviously. And the solution is you literally control your sense inputs with very fancy programming.
right. One of the
So
things that happens in chapter 1, which I thought was quite clever, was there's a guy who wraps himself in a floating advertising banner, and
yeah,
whatever the sense filters cuts him out, so he in effect turns invisible.
he's invisible.
And
Yeah,
in the text it says that's something from like an old romance. No one actually really did that in real life, but actually it would work in real life in that world. So the guy did it. Yep. Yep.
yeah, that was very cute. Another thing
I
I
have to
really,
say, I'm gonna repeat a compliment because I'm an author and therefore an egotist. Publishers Weekly, in their review of me, it was the first review I had come out, said there are great new ideas in this book, about 2 per page. So I was really trying to do the big idea overload. I mean, it was quite deliberate on my part to try to see how many ideas I could cram into a book and to make it as science fiction as I possibly could.
yeah, you definitely did. Another aspect I really enjoyed is just how many zillions of options each person in this world has as far as how they want to spend their time. I mean, as the internet has developed and connectivity has let people just dive into their little niche interests, this as the computing power and the wealth becomes increases,
Mhm.
that just becomes more and more where you got these people, hundreds of thousands of people living every day of their life in some virtual machine, just focused on the most bizarre thing you could imagine.
Yep.
No one else has the slightest idea that exists, but for all these people, this is their life. It was
Right.
it was a
Right.
mind bender. Another thing that's great about this series is that for most of the first book, I guess, it's a nice ringtone.
Thanks.
Most of the first book, the reader kind of doesn't know what's real and what's going on, which is just kind of
No, it's a
fun.
mystery story.
It's a detective
It's
story, yeah. I
it's a
love that.
detective story, and the main character is told that he's fooled himself about something. He's edited his own memory. And in this background, in this utopia or near utopia, it's assumed that no criminal can do that to you against your will. So that if he did something to himself, then he did it. And the question is, why would he do that? What about myself would make me stop you know believing in myself? Make me want to change myself. Excuse me. Excuse me. I have to pause our conversation. I need to phone my wife. She's trying to phone me. No,
Yeah, no worries.
no, phoning me, Arma. It's.
There. So yeah, we're back. Small interruption. Yeah, I was talking about the fact that in your world, people could just dive into whatever niche reality they want to live in, so long as they have the resources to pay for the computing power. Oh, that was another interesting thing. You had changed money, because the society is so rich. The only true currency, the only thing of value, is computing power measured in time increments, if I recall correctly.
Correct, computer seconds. But you're slightly incorrect. There were 3 currencies, not 1. One
Okay.
was computer time, one was gold, and one was grams of antimatter,
Oh, that's right.
because antimatter was the most compact form of energy possible, and energy was always in scarce supply. Now, I didn't have a post-scarcity, society like some of my contemporary science fiction writers imagined for the far, far future. because I don't believe in such a thing. I've studied economics. Because whatever your limiting factor is going to be the factor you have to economize. Now, if you're very, very wealthy, all that means that you're going to try to do things that are more and more ambitious. So I had one of my characters trying to tame the sun. He was attempting to manipulate the solar magnetic fields in such a fashion as to produce and control the solar flares so they would not form a hazard to interplanetary communication and travel. That was Helion, the father of my character, Phaeton, my hero Phaeton. You see, well, that requires a lot of effort. That requires a lot of energy. Okay. So no matter, so I don't care how wealthy you are, you're never going to get rid of the fact that you're going to have inequalities of income because people are going to find each other unequal in how beneficial they see each other as being. What they're willing to trade, what you're willing to trade to me, or I'm willing to trade to you, is not going to be equal for all people. Some rock stars are going to be more popular than others, if nothing else. You say.
I do
So
love.
yes, everyone who could do anything they could afford to do, and computer time was one of the main limiting factors because the computers by that time were not only intelligent but they were super intelligent. See, I had postulated not just one singularity. That was the term at the time for the unimaginable future, but 7. Because I put the story very far in the future. So, and one of my delights was writing the character list at the beginning, because I wanted to tell the readers what the different neuroforms were, because
Right.
humanity had changed itself artificially into several different ways of rewiring their nervous systems. Some people had done it to get rid of emotions. They were called the invariants. Some people did it to expand on their intuitive sense. They were called warlocks. Some people had done it to form group minds or mass minds, because that's something people have always kind of wanted, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, one of the things that struck me about this series as I read it is you clearly have studied your economics, if not your Ludwig von Mises, and it definitely showed.
Ludwig von Mises would definitely showed. And one of the more absurd things about the book, and I don't want to say this because I don't want to discourage people from reading it, but there is a scene where they're talking about something and suddenly they launch into Ricardo's theory of economics. The supercomputer is explaining why human beings, even though they're less than 1% of the intelligence of the supercomputers. By the way, the word Sophotek. It was not made up by me. That was made up by Paul Anderson, an author who's better than me. And if you haven't read Paul Anderson, then you should read him first. Just by the way. Sophotek is his term for it, and I borrowed it because out of respect for him, out of an homage for him. But yeah, Sophoteks are godlike, but the not everyone can afford his own personal, home supercomputer. When I say supercomputer, I meant these things were godlike. These things were able to calculate thousands and millions of ideas beyond any possible human capacity. And so making up artificial worlds to live in, my heroine Daphne, one of 2 Daphnes, that's her job. She's actually a writer. She's actually a poetess who makes up artificial worlds. So, I should say one other thing. The story begins during a masquerade. The masquerade is a year long, and during the masquerade, everyone's identity is hidden beneath a disguise, so that for the first time in 1,000 years, no one knows exactly where the real Phaeton is, and the
Mm.
bad guys who are tricking him, and there are bad guys tricking him, lose track of him, you see. And because they lose track of him, he comes across a clue that things are not what they seem to be. And that's the Neptunian in chapter 1 that he encounters.
Um, so this society is very, very wealthy and very, very powerful, but because your limiting factor is the laws of physics, they're not godlike.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm curious what that limit is for these artificial intelligences, these sophotechs. What
Entropy.
what can they be? Nothing else, just entropy?
They're gonna die eventually. The sun is gonna run out of energy. The stars are gonna go cold. It may be a very, very long time indeed by our standards, but not by theirs. Their lifespan is still gonna seem one lifespan to them. And in fact, in this book, you will see a basic conflict between the 2 philosophies that were my governing philosophy at the time. On the one hand, I was a Stoic, and I really admired Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius and the Roman Stoics. And the Stoics believe that you're supposed to face death without flinching because it's the reality no one can escape. You're supposed to do your duty and not get emotionally attached to things that you know are going to perish eventually. It's very harsh. almost military kind of philosophy. On the other hand, a libertarian tends to be a bit of a libertine. He seems to think that anything you do to pleasure yourself, no matter what it is, provided it doesn't have any downstream consequences harmful to others, should be licit. So they don't actually believe in the traditional morality of, you know, monogamy and chastity and so on and so forth. But they do kind of believe in honesty, and I picked this up from like Ayn Rand and Robert Heinlein and other authors whom I came across during my tender and impressionable years as a youth. But those two philosophies are in conflict with each other because one is completely duty based, and the other is completely self interest based. One is selfless, and the other is selfish. So the conflict in the story is between what do you do if you're a basically unaging being, but you're still mortal, and you still live in a universe that will run out of energy one day. You see, the heat death of the universe, or the big crunch, or the big collapse, whatever the ultimate fate of the universe is, you can't escape. You're still gonna die. So how do you deal with that? You see? Now the Sophia text of the Golden Ecumen had one answer, and the silent Ecumen Sophia text, the nothing Sophia text, had a different answer. So I'm not sure if I want to say more without giving you any spoilers, but
Yeah,
the
you
book is
said
the
you.
book is 20 years old. The book is 25 years old. So if you want to spoil anything, go ahead and ask me a question.
Yeah, I was going to spoil a whole bunch, but then you said what you said, so I decided not to too much.
Go ahead. The book's been out for a long, long time. If
Before I,
anything, it might prompt anyone's people might be more interested in reading the book if they know more about what's going on.
before I, for,
I'll give the main spoiler myself.
okay,
The crime Phaeton committed was building a starship because the people of the Golden Ecumen were afraid that if he colonized the nearby stars, and keep in mind, the speed of light is a consideration. It's going to take hundreds of years to get to any star within the next 100 light years. Okay, but at their level of technology, since they are very long-lived beings, 100-year flight or 1,000-year flight is nothing to them because they're going to live forever, right? I figured that as a science fiction writer, I said, okay, the speed of light is a fundamental constant that unless our theory of physics is fundamentally wrong, unless the standard theory of physics is fundamentally wrong, then we either have to find starships that fly so fast they can do better than 99.99% of the speed of light, in which case your personal time will be short and everyone you know back on Earth will be dead by the time you reach your target planet. Or or there's a medical breakthrough where everyone either can sleep for 1,000 years or simply stay awake for 1,000 years, and 1,000 years doesn't mean anything to them because they're going to live for a million years. You see? So I said, okay, let's take option number two. Let's say in the Golden Age is option number two, and you can live forever, and you don't mind the long travel times. They just don't seem that important to you. Well, the drawback is, of course, the idea that I borrowed for this story from the game I never ran, which is, what if you put your immortality at risk by going out into other colonies? And what do the people back home think if you're colonizing outer space and the people of the other colonies are not in close communication with the golden ecumen you've created, with this polity that is so rich and so moral and so well behaved that they basically have no crime? Well, the chance of war goes up from 0 to whatever it is, 1%. But if you're immortal, why risk that 1%? You see? So the people back home don't want him to launch that ship. They don't want space travel. So, in effect, my story is about the fundamental dream of science fiction. I was trying deliberately to harken back to the golden age of 1930s uh, astounding magazine, John W. Campbell's Astounding, and Analog magazine. And I wanted to say, this is the technological future that we can be promised, but people are holding us back from it. Fear is holding us back.
fear, yeah,
Keep in mind, this was written long before Elon Musk, who, by the way, is probably a Heinlein character himself. He's the man who sold the moon from Heinlein's Future History. This was before a rocket ship could land on its fins the way God and Robert Heinlein intended. Okay, we didn't have any plans for colonizing Mars in my day, and I couldn't see why. I didn't see why we had given it up. I mentioned that the guy who lived at the time of the Wright brothers, if he lived long enough, he would have seen the moonshot. And then after the moonshot, we haven't seen the Mars shot yet. We've sent robot probes out, and those are very impressive technologically. But how come we haven't put a flag on any other planet with this one? You see, as a science fiction reader, that's kind of offensive to me. So I wanted to write a book about that. I want to write a book about the high cost of dreams, the risk of dreams, the inevitability of death, and the lure of utopia. Because my utopia is as utopian as I can imagine, but it's actually not perfect. It's perfect does not exist in a universe that has entropy in it.
There's
Perfect does not exist in a universe with human beings in it.
there's
See?
something amusing that came to me as you were talking, and as I read the series.
Snoop.
As mankind gets richer and richer and richer and smarter and smarter and smarter, it gets to the point where its biggest worry is the creatures just over the other hill that they're afraid are going to come attack them. It's the same, it's the same basic fear and worry, which is just compounded by a zillion zeros or whatever.
I believe science fiction is the genre best apt to explore both the fears and the hopes of the future. But I believe most people think science fiction is kind of progressive and radical because it's always about what's changing in the future, not about what's staying the same. But I think it also has to have a conservative uh, theme to it, no matter what your personal politics are, because you are supposed to show if technology changes things in the future, what also stays the same.
Correct.
You see, if you're a fan of Casablanca, you will recognize the song as time goes by, because there's certain things that are just not going to change. When two lovers woo, they'll still say "I love you," and so on and so forth. You see, now your ability to make robot copies of yourself to go with your robotic husband on their honeymoon while you go off and do something else illicit. I mean, that might change. That might be different in the future, but still, I in the future I invented, there's still people are still marriage and are giving in marriage, and there's still life and there's still death. It's still possible to die in their utopia, which is not really a utopia. It's a near utopia.
I've always thought science fiction was the best genre because you can do everything else in it. The
Yeah.
You just have more options to play around with to really test what is this human emotion, what is that human emotion, what sorts of conflicts can we. I want to defend libertarianism a little bit because
But before we go on, I want to make a comment on your last comment.
sure,
Science fiction, I agree with you, is the broadest and the best genre, and I'm very pleased that it's basically mainstream. Because if you want to write a detective story, just make it a space detective. Isaac Asimov did it. If you want
right.
to write a mystery story, make it a mystery in space. If you want to write a pirate story, make it pirates in space. Everyone loves space pirates, maybe. You know, there's basically the only genre you can't do as a science fiction story is the drab mainstream novel that's concerned only with the here and now. And that drabness took over our mainstream literature from about 1900 to 1990 in America, and it very much to the detriment, I believe. Suddenly, after about 1900, you suddenly did not have mainstream stories with the witches from Macbeth, or the ghost from Hamlet, or the Cyclops from Homer, or the devil from Milton. You just didn't have any fantastic elements in it. So the fantastic elements packed up their kit bag and moved into the pulp magazines where they kept the tradition alive. I submit that I am in the tradition of the great poets of the past, not the people who wrote for the slick magazines in the 50s and 60s. Are
I
you going to say? Are you going to defend libertarianism?
for a little bit, but just to
Did I
underscore
say anything against libertarianism except for just the fact that I wasn't one anymore?
only slightly. I want to
Okay,
underscore your previous point. I can see value in novels set in a particular time and place. That sort of parochialism, but yeah, in general, take the limits off and just go nuts. I was just going to say that you mentioned libertinism, and although I certainly know plenty of libertarians who do that, the best ones I know sure do act like Stoics, as far as I can tell.
sure.
It's not just my limiting moral behavior or principle is that I can't harm others. Obviously, I want the best for myself, and getting whacked out on drugs and doing every silly thing and being the grasshopper rather than the ant. That's not doing me or my future self any good.
Oh, don't get me wrong. Ayn Rand herself, who is something of an icon among libertarians, uh, proposed that man has to live according to his best nature. But she was an atheist, and so her idea of the best nature was based on a romantic and heroic ideal. It's not an ideal that I dispute. I think she's right as far as she goes. And the heroic man is not going to addict himself to drugs, even though most libertarians say if you have the government govern men's morality, it costs more than it's worth. The danger from the government being overzealous in its censorship is greater than the dangers of an uncensored civilization.
Right.
That's the basic libertarian argument. It's a pragmatic argument warning of the dangers of government, and so libertarians do tend to emphasize the dangers from government regulation and underemphasize whatever benefits there may be. That's their basic approach.
Yeah, and there's one other addendum is that the shorthand for in my head is just that the means are the ends. If what you want is a better culture and you've just decided reflexively, well, there ought to be a law, so you use force to try and get to that better culture, oops, you've done something really immoral. You've tried to force your fellow citizens into behaving the way you want to. And there's room for force in society if it's self-defense, but not if it's just like, hey, I think you need to act better, so I'm going to send men with guns to make you act better.
You sum up the libertarian argument very adroitly.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Back to your great trilogy.
Now, by the way, I was up for the Prometheus Award. Are you familiar with that award?
I am.
Back in the day, but I lost to J.R.R. Tolkien. So here I was as an arch libertarian who had penned out a super libertarian future that was even more. It was like Galt's Gulch in space. If you catch my reference.
Yeah, kind
And I lost to a guy who was in favor of sacred kingship as the method of government. And I said, okay, libertarians, you had your chance. I'm gonna write in other politics from now on.
But you got to admit,
you didn't give me the gold coin I wanted.
You got to admit that one true ring metaphor is just so good.
Oh, I believe Tolkien is the best author of our century, bar none. The mainstream authors don't even approach him. The Great Gatsby is garbage compared to Lord of the Rings. And sorry if I offend someone with that opinion, but the Lord of the Rings is about something very deep and very important indeed, which is basically he's dealing with the nightmare of all mankind who wants to be at one with nature like his elves are, but who's facing industrialization and a loss of the spiritual reality that exemplified by the wizards, who are actually angels, of the spiritual reality that the modern man has kind of lost. So his book is almost as if he's saying to Nietzsche, "No, God is not dead. you just don't see him. You just don't see his hand in all these works." So I think Tolkien is equal to Shakespeare. I think he's equal to Milton. I think he's equal to Haman.
Yep, high praise. I was about to ask you, forget where we went with that, but the limiting principle to truth held by the Sophatex, because they do end up, one either goes insane or makes a conceptual error despite having access to trillions of terabytes of information and all the computing power in the universe.
Well, you notice what I did in the final scene there.
Yes.
That error makes weakness in his armor, you see.
Yes. Yep. Another cool thing.
And I think that's the way philosophy acts. I think if your philosophy is false to facts, you're going to make yourself stupider in that one topic. And any topic that's logically related to that topic, the stupidity is going to spread, the darkness is going to spread. I've talked to men about like political economics or something where they were perfectly logical, perfect geniuses. But if they got onto a topic that was one where they had a neurosis, suddenly their brain turned off.
Yep.
And it was a shocking thing. And I don't pretend that I'm immune from this effect either. But I did note it, and that's what I used in my book.
Yeah, it was a brilliant.
Falsehood makes you vulnerable, is what goes on. It in effect in the book, without giving away the surprise ending, if you take untruth as a principle, and I think both libertarians and non-libertarians can agree on this. I think every honest man can agree on this. If you take untruth as your God, then it's going to turn on you, and you're just going to make yourself a slave. You'll become a slave to the false world you're creating. And the irony is, in my golden age, your ability to make a false world is immediate, is immense. You see, but if you put on the sense filters and you're not seeing reality, then people are going to deceive you.
Yep.
You see, and it's on you in that case. In the libertarian utopia, you have no one to blame but yourself.
Yep, I agree. I guess I have one last area. Um, the golden ecumen doesn't have a government, except it totally does, because you use the
Here's a
threat.
parliament.
Yes, but who really runs things, if anybody does, is the Council of Hortators, wielding the one threat that matters, which is shunning, essentially.
Right, ostracization.
Ostracization.
Very similar to the Puritans of the Massachusetts Bay Colony.
And that's totally fine. Libertarians have no problem with that, but it does get tricky when you're sort of getting shunned from the entire solar system, or the entire
Right,
planet at least.
right.
And that device that you use rests critically upon a very rigid understanding of intellectual property. This
Yes,
one guy owns this one technology that is the reason people can reboot themselves, stay immortal after they die or whatever.
right.
So my question is, do you really believe that IP needs to be that strict, or should be, or was it just a device to make this plot, function over the?
What, me personally?
Yeah.
You want to know if the author thinks what the characters think? I'm not sure that's a legitimate question.
Oh no, I was wondering.
But I will answer it. In my background, because people are immortal, the intellectual property rights lasted forever. In real life, I believe that in the United States, the intellectual property rights for copyright law is too long. I believe that after a generation or two, you should be able to write in the background, even with the characters that other men made up, in order to keep the invented worlds alive. Now, you run a risk if Wizard of Oz goes into the public domain, then someone might write a book or a play called Wicked, where they're trying to reverse and that's the appeal, that's the joke of the story. They're trying to reverse the moral polarity of the story. But if your intellectual property lasts too long, then it tends to stagnate.
Yes.
If that's the case. Now, in terms of useful inventions like the secret of immortality, I mean, how much money is the guy supposed to make in return for that? I mean, I put it to you. But if you're going to start putting a limiting factor on intellectual property, then at that point you are no longer a pure strict libertarian. You now are making an argument. In effect, there's a common good that also has interests that at times must override the good of the individual. Now, I'm no longer libertarian. I'm open to that argument. I'm open to the common good argument. But I am an ex-libertarian, and libertarians are very wary of that argument, and rightly so, because it's been abused by the most wicked people in all of history. And I will hold up the communists as being as wicked or more so than the men of Nineveh, or the Hittites, or the most cruel emperors of the Chinese. They're worse than Tamerlane. Okay, so I am very sympathetic to the libertarian desire to avoid arguments resting on the common good. But I also believe that there are certain common goods that cannot be privatized. I don't think the military or police procedures should be privatized, for example. That would cut against the basic idea of civilization. As a faithful Roman Catholic, I do believe that welfare should be privatized. I don't think it's the government's business. But then again, I think there should only be one universal church. So. And therefore would coordinate the welfare and make almsgiving, if not compulsory, at least strongly encouraged by custom. The big libertarian dream, and I think this is a good dream, is if we have men who are moral, the need for coercive law grows ever less, but the need for tight customs grows ever more. The paradox of libertarianism, if I may, is that custom is usually enforced by consensus opinion, by a culture, shared language, shared background, shared rituals, shared religion. And if you want to have a multicultural or a diverse society, that core of unspoken expectation of custom is going to be put at risk, if you see what I'm saying. Now, the free market wants to trade with everyone, whether they speak your language or not. But if you want to have a community where the laws don't have to be enforced coercively, where people just out of respect for their neighbors will voluntarily abide by custom. Well, they kind of need to be one culture at that point in order to achieve call it the esprit de corps that you need once you move away from strict individualistic libertarianism more toward a consensus or a communal culture. There's my political philosophy for today.
I promised myself I wasn't going to argue political philosophy with you, so I won't. But I will say that I am a libertarian, and there's a bunch of different types. I think that the pure anarchists are on more solid logical footing than the minarchists were. And I think part of that is just completely rejecting intellectual property as not being consistent with what the definition of property is. But as to your broader
Well, in
point,
that case, since you brought it up, what's your opinion of intellectual property? Do you think we should have intellectual property laws?
no,
Because such luminaries as Thomas Jefferson did not. He said
no.
you don't lose anything if you light a candle from your neighbor's candle, he doesn't diminish your fire. That's what Jefferson
Right.
said.
I think he was right. Just based on what, intellectual things aren't scarce the way physical things are. So the idea of property, I think, doesn't matter to them.
But as an author, I can assure you that they are, because it takes me a lot of time to write a book. And if you want to read
Sure.
my book, then you have to reward me for it.
I swore
And
I
if you
wouldn't.
just make a copy of the book without consulting me. Now, if every time you bought a copy of the book, we agreed to a side contract, we shook hands and maybe promised me personally that you would not give a copy to the book to anyone else who wanted to read it, that would be legitimate under even an anarchistic libertarian
For
system, would
sure.
it
Yeah,
not?
for sure.
Okay.
Contracts can solve most of these problems, in my opinion.
So
But I wanted to, rather than
if the
argue with you about that, I wanted to address your bigger point, which was
Sure.
you said a free market wants to trade with everybody, but we'd have to have a common community or something. I don't think that follows necessarily
No, I said
either.
the opposite. I said the exact opposite.
Okay,
Free market wants to trade with everyone regardless of your language or culture. We don't mind. I benefit, you benefit. That's the core of the free market. But if you want to have, let's say, suppose you want to live in a town where divorce is discouraged by public opinion, and you want to have a coherent community where everyone agrees that divorce is bad for kids, you don't want to have it. Okay, well, no matter what your personal opinion on, let's just hypothetically say there's a group of people who want to live in a community that has that, but they don't want to pass a law making it illegal to get divorced. They just want to have it be enforced by custom. That kind of custom requires a shared language, culture, values,
sure,
holidays. That's what my point was.
sure. But to get that, I think all you need is free entry and exit plus contracts. I don't think you need an overarching, like, the way I think of it is our species really needs governance for sure, but that doesn't mean it needs a monopoly government. I don't think that's the best way to get to order, is that uniquely top down way. I think bottom up is the better way to achieve this kind of order.
As Ayn Rand herself said, what do you do if you have two protection companies, private protection companies that come into a legitimate conflict with each other
Smith
over
and
a piece?
Jones. Yeah, I really like Ayn Rand, but she was wrong about a bunch of stuff. I think that was one of them. I think because conflict is expensive and the fact that this is so obviously foreseeable, these mutual law companies and security companies would just have agreements in place of third-party arbitration and whatnot. I think that negotiation among people of goodwill would win out over violence, because violence is destructive and expensive and counterproductive, and most of us don't want it. I mean, like, I think in
I
Somalia,
agree,
you couldn't.
sir, that most of us don't want it. What
Right,
do you
but we
do if your
outnumber
protective
everybody.
company What do you do if your protective company is set up by a perfectly fine and honorable man? He runs it for years. He retires, and his son takes over, and his son is Wesley Moosh. His son is a disreputable person who thinks in the short term.
Well, unlike monopoly government, I can just switch companies.
Sure, but he's still got all the guns.
He doesn't have all the guns. Why would he have all of them? I mean, if you read Robert Nozick, his complaint against anarchy
I've read
was
Robert
that.
Nozick.
So you know what I'm talking about. He
Sure.
says that the big problem is eventually you'd have a cretation of power, and all the gangs would join up until you end up right back at monopoly government.
No,
To
I
which
don't think that's inevitable. My
I don't
respect for
either.
Mr.
Yeah.
Nozick. I think the problem is that some people will say, death first. My honor has been offended. I am not willing to settle this by negotiation. If you
Some
want
will,
my property, come take it.
some will.
Mene lobe.
Um, I agree. I'm not saying we have utopia before us. I'm just saying that the one method is way better than the other. I think the corruption involved in a monopoly is just obvious and unavoidable given human nature. So why give him that one true ring of power? Least give the people the power to opt out. Say, yeah, I don't want
Out
this
of
this leader.
out of respect to you, all I will do is point to Thomas Hobbes and all of human history to be on the witness stand in the to testify to the other opposite extreme, that private vengeance was the norm during the Stone Age, and archaeologists have reported that about 50% of the bodies recovered from the Neolithic period were dead of head wounds because they
Headwinds Club,
smashed
yeah.
each other in the head with the thigh of an antelope.
It is a strong argument. I'll grant you that. I am just more optimistic about our human future. Um, I do want to compliment you. I do say, like it or not, that it's a very libertarian science fiction trilogy. But what's so great is that it's really good writing. It's not just in your face libertarian polemic. You don't spend a whole chapter having John Galt give a speech or dominate
Yes,
an entire cocktail party with Francisco, whatever his name was,
the
talking
money
about
speech,
money.
Francisco
Yeah,
d'Antonia.
exactly.
Now, I like both the John Galt speech and the
I do
Francisco
too.
speech,
I
by
do
the way,
too.
but then again, I liked it when Robert Heinlein wrote Starship Troopers and he stopped and gave us a figure-wanging lecture on civic militarism. But then again, I also like the homilies at mass when I go and members of my own religion preach back to me what my religion says is true. But that's not entertainment,
Right,
see?
right.
You see? Notice that God is not mentioned once in Lord of the Rings. He's never mentioned by name.
Yeah,
Okay, it's not like Aslan in Narnia, who's very
right.
clearly a Christian stand-in. But there is a sense of the spiritual that runs through that whole book that gives the book itself a spirit that is highly appealing to readers. Even you don't have to, atheists, Protestants, anyone else can read the book and still enjoy it. You see,
Absolutely. Yeah.
because the story is still good. If the story touches what's basic to the human character, it's going to be good. What I tried to do, what my ambition was in Golden Age, is I wanted to say, what is the nature of ambition? Phaeton is a guy who wants to achieve more. He lives in utopia and it's not good enough for him. See? And then the utopians kind of have to be unutopian. They don't technically break the rule, but the ostracization,
Yeah.
the shunning,
Yeah.
I mean, come on. That's
Yeah.
they're not being fair, you see. Uh, and by the way, I do have my Sophotex warn them not to do it, and they ignore the advice of the advisors.
I love
Stupid
that part
monkeys.
too. It really is a great story, ladies and gentlemen. Go out and buy, I'm going to flash it on the screen again. These three
Yep.
here books: The Golden Age, The Phoenix Exultant, and The Golden Transcendence by my guest, John C. Wright. Um, yeah, you tell a great story. That's the best part of this thing, even though I do really have an affinity for the libertarianism of the society that it exists in.
Yep.
Before I let you go, I don't usually like to go much more than an hour. I want to give you a chance to point listeners and viewers to places they can go to consume your work, hear your thoughts, maybe buy some nice new books that you have on offer.
Well, I wanna boast about my latest and greatest book. I am 10 books into a 12-book trilogy.
Ooh,
I'm bad at counting, so whenever I start a trilogy, it always ends up being longer. Golden Age was my first book, by the way.
wow,
So, uh,
that's amazing. That's
I have a
quite
lot of I have a lot of other ideas, and I wrote in many other genres. Golden Age is hard SF. I don't break any rules of physics. But I wrote a story called Superluminary where I throw physics out the window, and I have teleportation and time travel and mind control and all sorts of just bizarre things that you would need to want to see again. But I was very disappointed with The Last Jedi, the Disney trilogy, sequel trilogy. I thought Disney had bought, you want to talk about intellectual property? This intellectual property was worth more money than any other IP in history, in my opinion. Okay. Not even the completed work of Shakespeare had as much of an audience or as dedicated a fan base as Star Wars. And Disney frittered it away.
it's
And
so
I
bad.
believe not just negligently, I think there was malice involved. I think the people You
It's
had to go
ideological.
of your way to you
Yeah.
had to go out of your way to offend your fans that deeply
It's
by writing a
ideological
story.
for sure. Yeah,
It's
they did not
ideological.
like this story. Yeah.
They didn't like science fiction. They didn't like the American can-do spirit that animated it. I mean, Star Wars is basically a nostalgic tip of the hat to Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon serials from the movies.
Yeah.
You know, George Lucas is a film guy, and he may or may not be a science fiction guy, but he's certainly a film guy. And in the films, Buster Crabbe used to go out and you know, have adventures on other planets, and it was fun. And so he did a thing that was fun that picked up accidentally the same mood and flavor of the 1940s. He himself is not a 1940s guy, but in his portrayal, he put across the optimism, the joy,
Yeah.
I mean, you have a space smuggler with a giant furry dog as a co-pilot. You got a space princess. You got a space farm boy who's learning to be a space wizard. It's great. Okay, how could anyone not just like? How could anyone not love this material? And then by the time The Last Jedi rolls around, the space wizard is no longer wise. He throws the lightsaber away. He's bitter. He no longer has hope. He's the guy who redeemed the soul of the Dark Father, Darth
That's right.
Vader,
That's
and
right.
he's not. He has no hope. He thinks that Ben is lost. Okay, there's no hope for the Kenobi boy. And the girl does not lose a hand when she's training. She doesn't sweat. She doesn't have Yoda balancing on her face. She just does everything. Easy peasy. Okay?
No
She can beat a trained Sith in a sword fight having never picked up a sword in her life.
no hero's
Okay.
journey at all.
No hero journey at all. The most interesting character of all was the defector. You have a stormtrooper who turns off his helmet, and suddenly he's not a mook. He's a real human being. He has passions and desires. Tickle him will he not giggle. Prick him will he not bleed. Okay? And he clearly had, he was supposed to be a Jedi. Was supposed to be force sensitive. You could see they dropped the hint, and they never played up on it. And I said, what a waste. This guy could have been the best character. He could have been everyone's favorite guy. And they just frittered him away. So I said, as a joke, I wrote up a review, not of the movie, but of the movie I wished it had been. And my family and I were driving back from the movie, and we just sat there for an hour in the car, chatting about what we would have done if it had been us. And everyone in my family, my sons and my wife, are all writers. They're all science fiction writers. So I wrote this up, the Dark Sun Rising story, instead of The Last Jedi, just like as a joke. And then I said at the bottom of the review of this non-existent movie, I said, but in a nearby timeline that's much less happy than ours, there's a different movie that sucks. And I'm glad I'm not living in your universe, in your timeline. You say. So people wrote to me that said, you're a science fiction writer, put your money where your mouth is, write it up. And I said, challenge accepted. So I said, I'm going to take the basic idea of Star Wars, the basic idea of Buck Rogers, the basic idea of any space opera, throw in a little bit of Spy Smasher from the 1940s, throw in a little bit of The Shadow, throw in a little bit of Lee Falk's The Phantom, and throw in a lot of Treasure Island, because I loved space pirates. I made my space pirates very piratey, and it's the space pirates are in the background universe or in the extended universe of Star Wars. They never showed up in the movies. I wanted to see the Jolly Roger, okay, on a spaceship. So, I decided to write. Star Wars was set in a galaxy long ago and far away. So I said, no, I'm going to set mine in a nearby galaxy, Andromeda, that's going to be in the future, in the far future. Earth is dead, and in fact, the entire Milky Way galaxy has been wiped out.
Oh
Every
my.
single sun has turned into a neutron star or a black hole because of something mankind did that was bad. But this was like their Noah's Ark story. They don't even remember that. This is far, far in the future of that. But I wanted to explain why human beings are in Andromeda Galaxy, along with several uplifted races that are their companions there. And there's also native races that are less human looking. You see.
If
So I
I
said, okay, in my background, I'm going to have the Galactic Empire, the greatest empire has fallen. The previous generation was the heroes that we know from. They're basically thinly disguised versions of Han Solo and Luke Skywalker. Except, I said, I want my Han Solo to be a duke instead of being a smuggler. And I want him to marry not a princess, but a pirate queen, because that he was supposed to be chasing. He's a privateer in the original story. And I said, I want my Luke Skywalker to be a real farm boy, except he's Irish bog trotter. And he has an outrageous accent, and he still wears farm boots. Okay. So, but these are the older generation. Their children are the main characters of this story, of this 10 this 12th, uh, and they have to seek out the ghost of the Empire because it still exists in secret. Okay, and no one believes them. No one is willing to admit that the nightmare might happen again, because of course the Empire was, in my version, was being run by my version of the Sith, known as the Dark Overlords. I mean, you gotta have a pulp title if you're gonna write a pulp. And the Dark Overlords, when they die, they don't stay dead because they can return as evil Force ghosts. I don't call it the Force. I call it the will. There's a golden will, and then there's a will opposed to the golden will, which is the dark will. And I decided that my dark will was not going to act like the dark side of the Force. It was going to be Azathoth. It was going to be Cthulhu. It was going to be something from an H.P. Lovecraft story. So my bad guys are really morbid and really kind of creepy. And I changed one or two other things, like my female Jedi. I decided to call them Templars because there was a medieval knightly order that was falsely accused of witchcraft, but people still think of the name as kind of creepy. So I wanted a word for a space knight with mystical powers. But my female Templars, I said, I don't like women when they fight. I think it's ugly. I think it's bad. If they're going to have a bow and arrow, I want them to shoot demons. I want them. The Japanese have a custom that you can drive away a demon with a bow and arrow, which I thought was a great custom. I'm sorry that we don't have it in the West, because that's a great way to banish. Imagine The Exorcist if it also included archery, for example. So my main character girl is an exorcist with a magical bow and arrow, but the bow is halfway into the spirit world, so nothing made of matter can stop the dart, can stop the arrow. She can shoot through armor, you see, but she's not supposed to kill people because she's a priestess, basically. Well, she's a failed priestess. Never mind. I have a priestess. I have an undercover cop who's got to infiltrate the space pirates. I've got a drunkard. I've got his brother. His older brother is a senator. So there's a little bit of politics involved, and there's also a space pirate action adventure. There's also the girl in the mystical quest. Her planet was wiped out. I decided that she had to be an orphan. So not only her mother and father are killed before her eyes when she's 7 on the first page, but her entire planet freezes to death when the Empire puts out the sun. Okay? So she's raised as a street rat, and she's a pickpocket, and then she gets saved by the Golden Order, and she's raised in a nunnery as a holy woman. Okay? But she's got this background past as a rogue, as a sneak thief, as a pickpocket, you see? And she works for this mysterious spy master called Night Shadow, who is an astral projecting black ghost, and no one knows who he is, and no one knows what he's up to, and maybe he's a good guy. So he believes her. He believes the Empire still exists because she saw her planet destroyed by it. But no one else does. Everyone else wants to think the Empire is dead, you say. But how do you kill an undead? How do you kill a ghost? So that's the story of StarQuest. And as you can see, StarQuest, Star Wars, I didn't even bother.
You didn't even bother.
I'm trying to do an homage to what Star Wars would have been. I
And
want
when
to
this
change
is,
it enough so that readers still get their money's worth, but I want them to be reminded of Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon and Star Wars and everything else that they loved in those books. So I want to show people what you could have done if you had not had a political agenda, if you just wanted to tell a story.
did you say that so far there are 10 of these out and there'll be 12 total?
No, 6 are in the 5 are in the store right now. The 6th just went to the printer. The next books 7, 8, 9 are on the editor's desk. I just sat down to start chapter 1 of book 10 today.
Oh, wow.
So and there's going to be 12. There's going to be 12 books.
If I were you, I wouldn't be able to help myself, but I would find a way to insert into the backstory that the thing that destroyed the Milky Way galaxy was the Disney Corporation.
I'm afraid it is something much more Cthulhian than the mouse that destroyed them. It was the ambition. It was I'll spoiler warning. It was the ambition of men. It was men trying to make themselves a Kadashev 3-level civilization without going through the proper procedures. And because it's a Noah myth, then the hearts of men had to be filled with evil continuously in order for the whole galaxy to be destroyed. If you know what I'm saying, it's got to be mythic. It's got to be big and epic. So
I look forward to it.
I do have one tongue-in-cheek mention in one backstory in the book where the nurse maid of the 4 children of the 2 heroes. Okay, so this is my version of Han Solo's and Leia Organa's children, except in my version, his name is Duke Raytheon, and she's called Jade the Pirate Queen, Lady Jade. Their children are told that when Duke Lone was drinking in a bar, that a Imperial assassin came up to try to shoot him, and the assassin shot first, and then the Duke shot him back. And the maid is immediately fired. Lady Jade, the Pirate Queen, takes her children out onto the firing range and teaches them how to use a holdout blaster and how to hide weapons on their person at the age of 7 onward. And she tells them, you always shoot first. If there's an Imperial assassin coming, you draw your fists under the table and you blast him. And I put that in only because George Lucas tried to back away from
I know.
making Han cool.
I know.
Han is supposed to be a bad guy. He's dangerous. He's supposed to be a rogue, okay? If you watch that first movie and you haven't seen the others, you don't trust him. He's got a sidekick that's like a cross between a saber-toothed tiger and an ape. And he's cheating people and killing people, and he's a smuggler. I'm sorry. Han is supposed to be cool, okay? Cool people aren't in favor of gun control. I'm sorry. And even if you're in favor of gun control, you can't be in favor of blaster control. Okay, the blaster, the right to buy weapons is the right to be free. A.E. Van Vogt said that in 1939 in the Weapon Shops books. And if you want to read another good book, if you want to read another space opera book, then read Weapon Shops of Aesir by A.E. Van Vogt.
Good stuff. So people should go to Amazon, I assume, to find all these things?
It's for sale on Amazon. It's for sale from the publisher, which is called Tuscany Bay. We just opened a store. And you can go to my website, sci-fi-wright.com, if you want to find more information.
I will put a link to that in the show notes description. This has been great, John. Thank you so much for your time. And again, thanks for writing that trilogy. I just love it.
Well, if you read anything else of mine and you also like it, because I'm not sure any of my books are in the same genre of any others, so you might not like any of my material. But if you do, then please have me back on. If you can get through the 6-book series, Count to a Trillion, for example, or
I will
if you're into fantasy. I also write fantasy. If you want to read the Moth and Cobweb books, where evil elves are secretly running our society without our knowledge.
That's not just the news. That's fantasy.
If you are aware of the elves, if you put moly in your eyes and you can see them, then they're going to come for you. So I would not say it on the internet if I were you.
And we'll just delete that out. You're right. Why take chances?
I decided to have sneaky elves in one of my books, not the friendly elves of Tolkien. The elves from Shakespeare are actually a lot trickier and more dangerous than some of Tolkien's elves.
They should be. All right, John. Thanks again. And thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We'll see you next time on Haman Nature.